I'm Chanale. This is the weekly squeeze on Moral Edge. I have been reading a book this week. It's called A Refutation of the Quran's Understanding of Judaism. A real beach read. The author is Jewish, and he addresses the entire message to a single Muslim reader that he calls a Karim. It's written like a letter, and what he's really doing is asking the readers of the Quran and the Hadiths to look at what they're actually saying about the Jews. And what they're saying is not pretty. We have verse after verse describing Jews as hypocrites and liars and corrupters and prophet killers and pigs and monkeys and so on. There's a hadith that literally calls on Muslims to outrightly kill Jews. The author's argument is that most Muslims who pray every day and genuinely believe that Islam is a religion of peace, they've never really taken the time to do the work, to go deeply into the Quran and see what's actually sitting inside their scripture. And if they did, he says, they would be shocked. And then he asks the most important question that I really want to get into. If Muslims exist on earth because God willed it to be, because it's God's will, then surely Jews exist on earth for the same reason. So would God instruct his prophet to murder his own children? That's really what it comes down to. Joseph Cohen has been living inside that question for many, many years now. He grew up in a mining village in England, probably the only Jewish family for miles. He came to Judaism on his own in his 20s. He built the largest Jewish-Muslim dialogue website on the internet, then co-founded the campaign against anti-Semitism, and then founded the Israel advocacy movement, where you can find him now on Instagram. His socials will be down in the show notes. Spent years alone in England at anti-Israel protests, arguing for Jewish presence in the land of Israel, using the Quran itself as a source. He made Aliyah in 2024 and settled in Jerusalem with his family. His argument is that the Zionist case is available inside the Islamic scripture. The word Palestinian, surprise, appears 0 times in the Quran. We have the Surah 521 that says Moshe tells the children of Israel that God assigned this land to the Jewish people. The Al-Quds, the Arabic name for Jerusalem, traces straight back to the Jewish temple. And most importantly, you believe that a Muslim Zionism is theologically possible, the same way Christian Zionism is now a thing, thanks to Christians rereading their texts and finding the Jews inside of it. Welcome to the show. Hi, thank you for coming out.
There's nothing left for me to say now.
Oh,
okay,
there is plenty left for you to say. I know that you spend so many hours a day talking to strangers on the internet. I'm glad that you can sit here and talk to our audience a little bit. I know for some people, this is something they've never really touched on before. The Quran is completely unfamiliar. So I want to ask a question. You've spent years explaining to Muslims why their own book supports the Jewish presence in this land. Okay, I want to flip the question. What do you wish Jews and Zionists and pro-Israel supporters understood about the Quran that most of them don't? Because we walk around thinking that we're dealing with a political argument, a political war, a political conflict. And you're saying the engine is theological. End of story. So what are we missing?
So in the West, there's a concept that politics is downstream of culture. If you win the culture war, you capture the politics. Politics are directly influenced by the culture. In this region, culture is set by religion. So you have religion, which sets culture, which sets politics. And people outside of this land that are disconnected from it imagine that this is just a nationalist struggle for territory. This is the Jews want a state and the Arabs want a state. And if you divide the state, then you'll have peace. And it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the motivation behind both people. So what's motivating the Muslims is an absolute intolerance theologically of a Jewish state on this land, which is why every single resistance movement is framed in Islamic terms. The Islamic resistance, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, these are all religious movements. They're not nationalist movements. And on the Jewish side, there are multiple motivations for us existing as a nation in this land, but it all stems back to our collective understanding that this is the land where we had our ethnogenesis. It's where we were sovereign for over 1,000 years, or we're certainly the majority population in either a protectorate or sovereign. And after 2,000 years of living under other nations and facing intolerable persecution, our only chance of surviving and thriving is what has happened, the re-establishment of sovereignty in this land for the Jewish people. And once you understand the motivations of both people, you can begin to look for solutions. Now, with Muslims, with Islam, there's Muslims and there's Islam. They're two very different things. The average Muslim I speak to hasn't got a clue what I'm talking about. You recited a verse from Surah Al-Ma'idah, the 5th chapter of the Quran, which goes, Ya qawmi yudkhulu al-arda al-muqaddasa allati kataba Allahu lakum, which is, O my people, this is Moses speaking to the children of Israel, enter the Holy Land that Allah, that God has kataba, written, assigned, given to you. When you throw this verse and show a Muslim this verse, they get very confused because they've been told what it means. But when you read the text, when you go on and read in Al-Isra a few chapters later, what they've been told makes no sense. And it's very comparable to what happened to the Christians. In the 16th century in the UK, during the Reformation, Christians began to read the Old Testament, from a Jewish perspective, the only testament in
The Bible,
the Jewish Bible. They began to read it in English, and they began to realize that the land had been promised to the Jewish people. And they developed their theology. I think the main advocator of this was a man called Thomas Brightman. So advocating the idea that for Jesus to return and rule for 1,000 years, the Jews need to return to Israel. And interestingly, the reason Jews were readmitted to the UK after being banned for centuries was because there was a belief amongst Christians in the UK that the Jews would sail on ships from Britain to the Holy Land and take the land from the Turks, the Ottomans. And that's how we came to be readmitted. That's why they petitioned Cromwell. And this all came about because Christians stopped relying on the clergy to tell them what to believe and started reading the black and white text and arriving at the obvious conclusion.
Right. So I'm going through this book and I'm seeing that it's like a concerted effort by Muhammad to completely tear down the Jews and all their entire value system throughout the Quran repeatedly. And when you go through each one, hadith by hadith, is that what it is? Or let's say quote by quote, really, it's all based in lies. I mean, his main issue with the Jews was that he called us liars because we didn't want to accept the Quran, which was not from God. So as I'm reading this, I'm realizing like so much effort put into describing the Jews as something they're absolutely not. I can only imagine that the people you speak to are confounded because this is their faith, but it's built on one big fat lie.
So there's two approaches that one can take when faced with the things that Islam says. You can either challenge and try to take 2 billion people out of their belief, which is, I mean, as a Jewish people, we've accomplished a lot. We punch above our weight to David and Goliath, but to remove 2 billion people from their belief is almost impossible and also not even desirable. And there actually is a line in the Quran which says, Lakum dinakum walidin, to you your religion and to me mine, which is the approach I take when I deal with Muslims. I believe a far more sensible approach to some of the verses that you're encountering in either the Hadith or the Quran, and I'll explain what they are in a minute, is to amplify voices of moderation. Islam is a religion that can be taken to a beautiful place. You can have a woman who's devoted her life to running an orphanage and helping the poor and feeding the widows, and she's basing it entirely on the Quran and the Sunnah, the tradition. And then you can have Daesh, who read the same books, and they're following the same Sunnah, and they're both on an authentic path. And they read, فَإِذَا لَقِيتَمُوا الَّذِينَ لَكَفَرُوا فَضَرَبَ الرِّقَابَ. When you meet the kuffar, the non-Muslim, strike their throats, which is exactly what they do. وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنْ النِّسَاءِ إِلَّا مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. The married women are forbidden to you except those which are right-hand possessors, so you can capture slave girls in battle, which is exactly what ISIS did. And they sold those girls, Yazidi girls, in markets and did the most evil things imaginable to their families.
Based in religion.
Based on this, both are following the Sunnah. Both have precedent, which is, if I was a Muslim, I would be furious that an expression like Allahu Akbar, which means God is greater, which should be, as a monotheist, as someone who believes in God, that should be a positive. I agree. Amen.
No one hits the floor when you say hallelujah.
Exactly. If you go into a European city, travel on the train and scream Allahu Akbar, everyone's going to jump off the train.
Right.
If you stand on the train and say Shema Yisrael, everyone's going to look at you like a bit weird, but no one's going to jump off no one's going to jump off the train. And if you say,
why aren't they? That begs the question itself. Is there a majority moderate Muslim world that we can count on to look at the text and say, you know what? That was translated differently. He had a beef. Muhammad had a beef with the Jewish people then. Things have changed. The world has revolved. We're going to reform. We're going to work together with our brothers because there's more proof in the Quran that we're brothers and that we should be working together than the opposite.
This is the chance. So to first step back and understand what Islam is. The Quran is the revelation that they believe was given to Muhammad and was written down by the Sahaba. That's the central text. And then a few centuries later, the Hadith were compiled and they were collected, and they have something called an Isnad, which is a chain of narration. Is
it like the Torah Shabbal Peh almost? Yeah, like the oral Torah?
It's similar but different. So the oral law was a living law that lived from the time of Moshe and the 70 elders all the way down to Rav Ashi,
the Jewish law,
and Ravina, and was the Kalot, which was and between this period, which spans over 1,000 years, the Talmud is sealed around 400 CE, and Moses like 1500 CE, something like that. So it's a long period of time, 2,000 years, and there are laws introduced. There's conversations. It's a conversation across the centuries between the rabbis that define what Jewish law is. The Hadith isn't that. The Hadith are the sayings and behaviors of Muhammad and his companions, the Sahaba, and law is derived from them.
Sounds like the Pirkei Avos.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. When you open Pirkei Avos, it's exactly the same with the fathers. Okay. So the ethics of our fathers opens up with the chain, which is what I was describing, the chain of that the Masorah takes from Moses all the way
Torah
to
was transferred over, right?
Over and over, not just the Torah. In our case, it's the oral Torah as well. And for them, they imitate the what they call isnad, the tradition, the chain of narration. But what they do, they have all these different hadiths that are floating around, and they'll say such and such heard it from such and such who heard it from such and such, and they
it's almost like old wives' tales at this
exactly,
point.
Exactly, and it's a few centuries later, and
or like Baal Shem Tov stories.
And these hadith can contradict each other. One of the most controversial ones is the age of Aisha when she gets married. Nothing to do with the Jewish people, but Aisha narrates in Sahih Bukhari. Sahih Bukhari is seen as like almost like the Bavli is the one of the most authoritative books. There's Kutub al-Sitta, there's the 6 books, very similar, the 6 authoritative collections of hadith, and this is the major one. You then have Sahih Muslim, probably the next one. And in this, Aisha records, so the woman who gets married, that she got married when she was 6, and the marriage was consummated at the age of 9, which is crazy. That's definitely not a positive.
Especially since it's still encouraged and practiced.
To this day, and it's based on this. But there are other hadith which contradict that. So there are hadith that said that after Khadija died, who was Muhammad's older wife, and they'd been married for a long time, his auntie said, you need to find some companion to confide in and to process the grief. And she recommends Aisha. Now, I've got a 6-year-old. No one's recommending that someone's grieving the death of their wife marry a 6-year-old, because a 6-year-old is not going to offer you the companionship and the intellectual maturity.
Contradiction there.
And so there's
Right.
so there's
Okay.
a whole science to the Hadith. And this is what many people don't understand. You can read a verse in the Quran and you can read a Hadith, but without the broader understanding of how Muslims can read this, you're kind of just picking a verse about a Malik out of context. And this is so when engaging with Muslims, the most important thing to do is help them to find authentic traditions of how they should be reading these verses.
It's funny you say that, because that's what this author argues. He argues that the years that there were the peaceful periods between Jews and Muslims, because was people either were ignoring what was written because they were illiterate and literally didn't know the text. They couldn't read Arabic. And the issue is that now that people have access to the Quran, right, they can be easily radicalized because the text hasn't changed. There's no rabbi still arguing today those hadiths that you say that are problematic, and then putting out a statement to the Arab world, the Muslim world, from now on, marriage, is over the age of 16 or 18 or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
They're kind of just letting it be. And then whoever, you pick what you want and you ride with that.
One of the major differences between Judaism and Islam is that we have a mechanism, which is the living law, the oral law, of how to, in a unified way, understand what the text means. So there are sentences, capital sentences for crimes within the Torah, which are never carried out. And even the ones that may have been carried out, it's such a rarity. So I'll give you an example. The rebellious son. It says put the rebellious son to death. Now that's a crazy expression. First, it's the most subjective thing in the world. Fortunately, I've got daughters, but they're very rebellious. When she refuses to tidy her room, does that mean we have to put her to death? Fortunately, Chazal come along and they explain that this has never been carried out. It's there to illustrate the severity of rebelling against your parents, the traditions of your parents. And we actually they go even further and say a court that puts one person to death in 70 years.
It's called a bloody court.
Exactly.
Right.
And so if you think how many people America puts to death each year, it was way more than 70 every single year. We're saying in 70 years, if you put one person to death, it's considered bloody. Islam doesn't have such. And so the mechanism which is used for this is the Beit Din Hagadol, the Supreme Court, where there's a legal framework for how we understand the Torah, how the Jewish people as an entirety relate to text. Islam doesn't have this, and every man is an island. And you said something which I would push back slightly on. You said someone that's ignorant can be easily radicalized. The most radicalized are the highly educated.
Most well-versed.
Yeah. And it's not to say you can have well-versed people who are not radical and actually have a very healthy understanding of their religion. But Islam is a civilizational religion. It's not a matter of faith. Like for a Christian, if you believe in Jesus, this is a system of governance, not just for Islam, for the world. And the more knowledgeable you are, I believe the more likely one is, particularly if you've been raised in an Islamic environment, to go down a more radical path. And that's the real challenge that we're pushing up against, is the men of wisdom are often the ones that are the most dangerous.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about the mosques in Queens where you have the what are they called, the preachers? They're yelling from the pulpit. Right? They're yelling from the pulpit the most extreme ideas, and it's almost, the question is it nefarious? Has the text radicalized them, or are they radicalized so they're interpreting and picking and cherry picking the text that works this narrative that we have to take over the world and jihadism and catch the Jews behind wherever they are and terrorism.
And so all of that,
it's like, is the egg the chicken what came first, the chicken or the egg?
So I believe that obviously the text came first, but the text came in waves. So the easiest thing to work with is the Quran. I mean, there's still, fortunately, I'm not Muslim, so it's not my issue that I need to solve. There are problematic verses in the Quran, without a doubt. But most of the more extreme So, for instance, you spoke about the Jews hiding behind the rocks, and this is coming from the Hadith. And so there's a Hadith that says, "La tabdu al-Yahud wa la al-Nasara bis-salam." It's forbidden to greet a Jew or a Christian with peace, and then when you meet them on the road, you're supposed to force them to the narrowest path. There's no way of packaging that in a...
I know. So we have young Muslims reading this. How is it ever going to be possible for them to want to build bridges or have any mutual camaraderie with Jews? I mean, at the end of the day, it's just not...
Because there are other hadith which contradict those ones. And so this
is... saying if there's a will, there's a way?
So it really comes... if there's a will, there's a way. There is a path. There's a misconception amongst many people that Jews thrived as equals under Islam. It's not true. We were second-class citizens.
Dhimmis.
We were one of the dhimma. Yeah, we were dhimmis. We were never able to achieve the same station as a Muslim, but we did better as a general rule than we did under Christendom. Correct. And
to the point that the Iraqis and the Sephardic Jews here in Israel will argue that their best years were when the Arabs were their neighbors and they could go into their villages and they spoke Arabic and there was this brotherhood. The Arab women would nurse Jewish babies. I mean, I can't even imagine that.
Forget. I do that to this day. And the overwhelming, yes, it's one of my many talents, but I haven't been able to find a way of monetizing that on YouTube yet. I go to Arab villages, I speak with Arabs, I speak to them online, and the overwhelming majority of them I get on fine with. That's not to say that they weren't cheering on October the 7th. That's not to say if there was a button that they could press that would just make us all disappear. I say in a non-violent way, but they say we disappear back to somewhere else or just cease to exist. I think most of them would press that button. But they've come to terms with the fact that we're here. And on a personal level, I get on fine with it. I'll give you a real example. I wanted to shoot a video in Shuafat. Shuafat was an Arab village on the edge of Jerusalem. And they built a refugee camp, which never had one tent and was buildings from the very beginning. And now to live there, you've got a minimum you'll spend on an apartment is 700,000 shekels plus. And these are all big skyscrapers. Some of them look very nice. And every single person, almost every person in Shuafat refugee camp works in Israel. And they will work, like by Israel, I mean, Shuafat is in Israel, but they will work on the Israeli side in a Jewish Israeli businesses,
bus drivers,
exactly, doctors, nurses. And here's the crazy part. So you speak to any of these people while they're at work, you bump into them on the street, you'll have a lovely conversation. If I wander into the camp, which isn't the camp, it's a suburb.
You're going to hear something else.
I'm not going to hear, I'm going to get lynched. I will be killed.
Okay, so that's the argument, right? You could say that Al Jazeera is speaking one language in Arabic and one language in English. And in English, it's not great as it is.
I think it's not even that. I think it's tribal. There's a disconnect.
They can't help themselves?
No, so I had a conversation with an Arab from Bethlehem, and Bethlehem used to be majority Christian, over 90%. Now 7% of the city is Christian and 93% is Muslim. So he was Muslim. And I was just talking about this to him. He was like, yeah, of course. I mean, what do you mean, of course? You stole our country. But you're our best friend when you're crossing over into our neighborhood. You're working, you're building apartments.
And you don't really believe we stole your country.
No, they really sincerely believe that what many people don't realize with the Palestinians is it's a modern identity built on a collection of people whom the overwhelming majority are very recent to the land. I'm going to do a video in the coming weeks, probably next week. I'm going to go to Hebron and visit the ancient Palestinian graveyard there.
That's what I was going to say. The ancient Palestinian citizens, they saw what happened here.
Yeah, but I was going even further. The ancient Palestinian graveyard, the earliest recording of it is 1290. Do you know what language is on the graveyard, on the gravestones?
I would imagine Hebrew.
Yes, Hebrew.
Surprise.
Yeah. A third of Hebroni Palestinians, they are Kurds. They came over in recent years.
And most of the Gazans are Jordanian.
Yeah, Jordanian. Right. No, there's some that fled from.
But still, you're saying it's tribal. They go back to their tribes, they go back to their people, go back to their tent. One agenda. This is their land. We're good, Jews bad. And we have to
It's
win our
not-
land back.
Yeah, it's not just it's Muslim land. And this is the painful thing for me, by the way, when I say there's a Christian village, which I won't name, in the Shomron, and it's very, very politically active, very hostile to Israel. They push out a lot of disinformation. I know they're living in fear for their lives. It's the same with the Christians in Bethlehem. They're afraid to speak out, and many of them are very politically active.
Their neighbors.
And they speak out against us, but they're afraid. Like, I know, I don't want to say too much. There are people in Bethlehem Christians that would rather Israel, at least the areas they're living in, just said, you're now Israeli. Here's a Israeli ID card.
So all this nonsense that we're racist against Christians, we spit at them, throw things at the street, whatever, attack them in the old city, those are such exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, I was at Yom Yerushalayim, the flag march the other day, marching with a Christian wearing a wooden cross. Now, you have to understand, whenever you hear of racist, religious, right-wing, extremist Jews, this is the march they show. And I'm walking through the streets with a guy wearing a huge wooden cross, and all he's getting is thanks for being there. No one's spitting on him. It's in a nation of 10 million people, 7 million Jews, you're going to find one or two extremists, bad apples. And those videos get broadcast around the world, and it's a stain on a genuine Chilul Hashem, because it's a stain on all of us. If you go to any nation, you'll find in the UK, you'll find British people that are anti-Semitic. You'll find that are anti-Muslim, anti-Christian.
Sure.
And the video of a person doing that, if it goes, the world has the sense to realize this is a lone individual. This is not representative of the British people. Here, we have one nutcase who does something crazy. Suddenly, we're all like that.
Right. The old city is not safe for Christians.
And so to bring it back to what this is they consider this waqf. This is Islamic land. This land cannot be governed by the Jews. Theologically, we're not supposed to.
So they're in exile.
Well, they believe, and they're kind of so. There's again. It shows the ignorance of most Muslims, including the shayukh, the scholars, as to the history of the Jewish people. So what they have, we mentioned the verse where Moses tells the children of Israel to enter the land that God gave them. A few chapters on, it talks about how the Jews will be kicked out of the land twice. And so if you speak to most Muslims today, now all the Christians watching this, all the Jews knowing this, that have a basic understanding of the Jewish Bible, know that there's two exiles. Most Muslims don't. They think there was one exile, and now we've returned, and now we're going to get kicked out again because we're so arrogant.
Oh, they missed some of the history.
And so when you go back to this is how you can really de-radicalize Muslims. Because if you take them back to their Rashi, if you take them back to the early commentators, what they did is they read the Jewish Bible to understand all the holes in the Quran. And they talk about there being two Jewish exiles in the past. And so all you need to do to de-radicalize a Muslim, in terms of they believe that there's going to be a war to kick us out of the land because this is Muslim land, is show them what Tabari, one of the early commentators, says about what this verse means.
But you said earlier it's impossible, and you speak to them all day, every day.
No, it's not impossible. It's difficult. So what I believe I'm doing with my content, I make videos. The average video I upload gets 1 million views. The long forms, unfortunately, not that many. But the short videos, 1 million views a video. A huge percentage of those are Muslims. I get messages from Muslims every day, some of them threatening to chop my head off, but many of them thanking me for
clarifying things that they never
them
understood.
or helping them to explore their own tradition and arrive at a conclusion they wouldn't have. And so what I believe I'm doing with my work is, we mentioned 500 years ago, the Reformation. If you'd have told our ancestors, I don't know where your family's from, mine's from Poland. If I'd have told my Polish Jewish ancestors 500 years ago, there's a movement taking place in Britain which is going to lead to a reality where in half a millennium's time, there is going to be this unbelievable friendship between Jews and Christians. Because back then, our understanding of Christians was crusades, inquisitions, ripping our flesh from our bodies as we were still alive. And a seed was planted in Britain that was then taken across the ocean to America.
They wouldn't believe it. So you're saying it is possible.
And so I believe we're planting seeds today. We're not going to see...
But you have more... You're more privy to what's going on. You're deep enough in these conversations. What the Muslims leaders say privately versus publicly. Is that moment coming?
Oh, I mean, they say it publicly. They just say it in a language that most of us don't understand.
Right. Or it's a willful ignorance. It's literally willful ignorance.
So I think coexistence, basically Islam is in a theological nightmare because the Jews, according to what their scholars have said for the last 1,200 years, 1,000 years, is that the Jews are supposed to be in exile. They're supposed to be one of the dhimma. They're supposed to pay the jizya till the saghirun, humiliated, humbled, belittled. We're effectively under the Muslim, under their protection. And Israel is a thorn in that belief because we're here. And not only are we here, we are humiliating. There's 7 million of us, and we're withstanding attacks from 2 billion Muslims. This is a real David and Goliath. We are Sparta. It should not be a reality that we're able to fly to Tehran and neutralize the leader of the Shia world. We should not be able to fly around the world, have intelligence operations which result in the neutralization of every major enemy that we have.
So that's my question. Don't they see God created them and God created us? Would God actually create them with the sole purpose of eliminating us?
So no, they believe ultimately, theologically, there's going to be a fight between us. There's going to be the Jews are going to stand behind the Dajjal, the Antichrist. Again, I can give people readings from their books of how this is only 70,000 Jews. It's not all the Jews. But the key part of all of this is we are this thorn in their belief system. And so I believe people like me, and there's Muslims sending the same message, are giving Muslims a way to come to terms religiously with the existence of our state. Because if they can't find a way to theologically accept Israel, we kind of collapse their entire belief system.
And to accept the Jewish people. Because even we see with Iran, right? So Iran is unfortunately falling to the hands of their ayatollahs that are motivated by jihadism and Islamic extremism. And we have the West that is uncomfortable aligning with the people of Iran because the people of Iran are aligned with the people of Israel.
Yeah.
It's like cutting off your nose to spite your face.
It's one of the...
It's like there's a lack of intellectual honesty. Because even if you want to argue that the Muslims are superior to Jews, you look on the internet, you see that we're the greatest contributors, Jewish people, to the world of medicine and physics and literature and science and economics and chemistry. Is it that they're ashamed? Because we know that the same kind of stuff doesn't come from their communities. So you're saying it's a spiritual thing, but is a part of it just like this? You see the Jews were such a small number and they cannot seem to win after all these years. So is there an element of like shame that you find that, when you're embarrassed in an argument, you lash out, you want to make the other person feel bad because you feel bad about yourself?
So I had a conversation with a Swedish Muslim streamer the other day. And he was gaslighting like I've never heard, pretending he'd never heard anti-Semitism from the Muslim community.
And you feel like, what are you talking about? Right? Okay.
And we spoke for 30 minutes. And then he just turned around and said, why aren't you happy? You guys basically own everything anyway. You control the world. Just be happy. I'd be happy if I was. And in that moment,
exposed,
the mask slipped. Mm-hmm. There was insecurity. Right. There's looking at Jewish success and there's genuine jealousy. And I think this runs deep. I've never met a community as susceptible to conspiracy theories as the Muslim community. And I don't know what the reason for that is, but at the heart of almost every one of these conspiracy theories is a Jew. And I believe it's probably deep within the the heart of the religion, in the sense that the Jews rejected Muhammad, and to this day we reject Muhammad. The amount of people that have tried to trick me into saying the Shahada. The Shahada is an Islamic declaration of faith, which goes, Ashhadu anna la ilaha illallah.
Right. And you could be converted by force.
So this is the thing. They say there's no compulsion in religion. And here's another, but you put to death if you leave Islam. So there is clearly, you are,
right.
There's force used to ensure that you never leave the faith. But the what they're doing is that Islam is threatened by the existence of Judaism. Islam is threatened by the existence of Israel. And what I'm trying to do is give Muslims permission to accept us, accept Israel, celebrate Israel. Look, if it says in your book that we're going to return and the land was given to us, celebrate that. Instead of fighting your text, embrace it. And
you would imagine if the Quran was in fact a true message from God above, and the people lived aligned to the text, then maybe they'd be more successful. Maybe the Arabs wouldn't be killing each other. Maybe they wouldn't be murdering each other in countries all around the world, which we don't talk about because no Jews, no news.
Yeah.
But it's not like they're thriving.
So there was the story the other day with Ben Gvir, and I went on a big podcast, and he was like, did you see what Ben Gvir did with the flotilla? Was he sitting by
he stuck his tongue out? He was obnoxious.
He was obnoxious. He said some crass things. Like, I'm not a Ben Gvir guy by any stretch. That same week, ISIS had killed dozens of Muslims in Nigeria. Boko Haram had killed dozens in Nigeria, and ISIS had killed them in the Congo. No, in the Congo.
Oh, in the Congo.
And so dozens of Christians have been killed. No news story. Not one news story.
Sudan is also the Muslim Brotherhood, all of that.
And we've got prime ministers and presidents of nations speaking out. Speak up for the dead Christians. Like, yeah, Ben Gvir is Ben Gvir. He's speaking to a base in Israel. He's going to say dumb stuff. But it's incomparable to the slaughter of Christians. And
it's a double standard.
Yeah.
100%. I want to switch gears because here in The Moral Edge, we bring our audience into the lives of incredible Israelis. You are now an Israeli, card-carrying, passport-holding, Tudat Zehut touting. You made Aliyah. You live in Jerusalem now. You walk on the streets. You're in the city that this argument is literally about, okay? Does that change anything for you? Does the Quran read differently when you're standing in that place? Or is every day?
The Tanakh reads differently. The Jewish Bible reads very differently. We're in Beit Shemesh at the moment, which is not so far from Jerusalem, and we just came out of the Jewish festival of Shavuot. Now, at Shavuot, we read the story of Ruth, who embraced Judaism. It's the time the Jews received the Torah. It's a very appropriate thing to read at this time.
Ruth is the mother of the ancestor of King David, and Messiah will come from it.
Exactly, and so an interesting point here is she's a convert. And so the Messiah is going to descend from a convert. So there's a thing that Jews are this elitist, exclusive,
snobs,
the snobs that don't like non-Jews. It's the opposite.
That's the Nazis.
We're commanded to love converts. You can convert. You just don't have to convert. In Judaism, we believe that God is truly merciful. And it's actually easier to get to Olam Haba, the world to come, heaven, as a non-Jew than it is as a Jew. We have a huge framework of laws. Like, how do I tie my shoelaces? What do I do? What's the first thing should leave my lips when I wake up? As a non-Jew, there's 7 basic laws, which are: don't murder people, don't rip a limb off a cat as it walks past you and start eating it. It's set up some court so you can establish a moral society. These aren't advanced in terms of strict laws that we have to follow. So it's much easier to get to heaven as a non-Jew than as a Jew, which is one of the reasons why we don't encourage conversion. But we do accept converts, and they're held in such high esteem that we believe the Messiah is going to descend from one. And so what blew my mind this year was I read this story all the time, and I'd just been to Bethlehem the previous week, and I opened it up, and it's like, this is actually taking place in that field over there. They were harvesting some wheat just here in Bethlehem. There's Ephrat, which is just a little bit further south of Bethlehem. And the whole story suddenly comes alive. When you walk in the fields here, you see the wheat, natural growing wheat, and crops that were first domesticated thousands of years ago in this land. And so you read the Tanakh, you read the Jewish Bible outside of the land, and it's this distant story which is geographically distant. In terms of time, it's distant. It's thousands of years ago. Here, you open up and you can just drive 15 minutes and you're at the site and you can turn over the stones that they would have.
But what do you say to the Muslim who says, but you're a Polish Jew, go back to Poland, you don't even belong here?
So one of my best responses to that, first I've done my DNA test. My DNA is actually Levantine. And so there've been DNA studies on the Canaanites and on a small number of Jews that were buried in the Second Temple period. And we know the haplotypes. There's J1, J2, E1, B1, B1, and I happen to have one of those haplotypes. It's not indigenous to Europe. And I actually am mixed race.
So you're not a Gentile.
So first my DNA goes back here, but more importantly, the Quran legitimizes us. The Quran talks about Bani Israel, the children of Israel, at the time of Muhammad. And the Jews that were alive today, so I mean, even the Constitution of Medina mentions the names of some of those families. Those families are still found today in Israel. They went to Yemen, and then from Yemen they came to Israel. Unfortunately, the Jews of the Hijaz were ethnically cleansed by Umar ibn al-Khattab, who is the guy who also conquered Jerusalem. But no, it's very easy. We have an unbroken tradition. We've kept the language alive. We've kept the religion alive. We've kept the people alive. Genetically, we go back. Someone like Netanyahu, they always love to talk about Netanyahu, but he has a European surname. If you look at the gravestone of his great-grandfather, it has 2 words after his name, Halevi. Now, Halevi means the Levite.
From the Levite tribe, right.
And I heard him giving a talk at Merkaz Harav, which is a religious seminary in Jerusalem, on Jerusalem Day. And he said very proudly that it wasn't just his father's line that goes back to the tribe of Levi, but it was also his mother's side. Now, for those that know the biblical story, according to our tradition, Moses belonged to the tribe of Levi. So Netanyahu is a direct descendant on both sides from that tribe. So he may have a Polish name that was given to him, or a European name that was given to him by European powers for tax purposes, but that's a colonial identity that was imposed on us by our oppressors. We had to exist, so we existed wherever we could.
Sure, I love that. So true. It's fascinating to me because the Jews are the people of the book. I mean, we're so fact-based where we could look back, like you said originally, the chain of the Masorah, and you would think that the Arabs would respect that, but they have seemed to make it their sole goal to.
But they don't believe it. So they
don't believe it.
They will tell you that you're not the real Bani Israel. And then 3 seconds later tell you, but you tried to kill Isa, you tried to kill Jesus. They believe he wasn't killed. Christians believe he was crucified and died for our sins. They believe that the body was switched at the last minute and he went to heaven, to Jannah. And
so if we're not killed. Really the Jews, then why do you hate us so much? No, and if we are the Jews, then we do belong here.
So they call us prophet killers. They call us the killers. They try to kill Isa. They use all the negative language of the Quran to describe us. They refuse to greet us with. So in Judaism, if I say Shalom Aleichem, how would you respond? Shalom Aleichem.
Okay, Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom.
And so in Islam, it's Assalamu Alaikum and it's Wa Alaikum Assalam. However, there are hadith that say you can't say salam to a Yehudi or to a Christian, and a Jew or a Christian, and so you say Wa Alaikum. And because there's another hadith that talks about Jews wishing death upon the Prophet at this time, their Prophet at this time. And so they say As'amu alaikum, and so they say Wa alaikum, and upon you. So if you wish them death, you wish them peace. If you wish them death, they wish it on you. If you wish them peace, they wish it on you. But they will refuse to greet any of us with peace. But if we're not the real Bani Israel, then why not give us a salam? Why not say peace?
It's a paradox. It's because it's like, listen, at the end of the day, the Torah is the true source of all that's good and holy in the world. And I pray for a day that our Muslim brothers can recognize that we come at them with peace. It doesn't say in our Torah to attack our neighbors. It says to live in peace and to be a beacon of light and a source of inspiration for the whole world. And that's really what we try to do in the most humble way possible. A quick lightning round. 4 questions. Share with our audience one Quranic verse that you think every Jew should know.
So we've already done what we'll do. وَقُلْنَا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ لَبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ اسْكُنُوا الْأَرْضَ. So we said to the children of Israel, dwell in the land, the Holy Land. So every Jew should know this. The Quran says you're supposed to live here. Our book says our book says that we're also supposed to live here. Exactly. And so our book says that we're supposed to dwell here. Their book says that we're supposed to dwell here. If you're a Jew and you're not dwelling here, this is the one verse in the Quran that you should pay attention to.
Even the Quran wants you to make aliyah. One moment in a street conversation that sticks out where you saw something genuinely shift in a person across from you.
It's not something that shifted in a person across from me because you rarely see that in conversations. But when I make a video, I'm making a video with the audience in mind rather than the person I'm debating. If I convince the person I'm talking to, amazing. But I'm much more interested in reaching the millions of potential people that could watch it. But one thing that really resonated with me was I was giving a talk at Speaker's Corner and in London, and I was surrounded by Muslims. And at the end of it, this kid came up to me with a very thick Gulf accent. And I read Muslim kid, and he could be no older than 15. And he said, I just want to thank you. In my country, which is Kuwait, we were taught that Jews are the most aggressive, violent, bloodthirsty people. And this is like nearly a decade ago. And after listening to you for the last 30 minutes, I know that they lied to me. And so most Muslims have strong views of Jews and they've never met a Jew in their life.
So you're telling people not to be afraid, to be like, hey, I'm Jewish, look at me, no horns.
Actually, I'll give you even better than that. There was a literal convicted terrorist who I've debated with a number of times. And in one of his stints when he wasn't in prison for extremism, he's like connected to some of the worst terrorist groups in the world. He left a comment under a debate with me and Mohammed Hijab, and who's a big Muslim preacher on the internet. And he said, I never thought I'd say this, but Joseph, a lot of this in Arabic, Joseph has more love and hate for the sake of God. He loves his people, and so he should. How could we expect anything else from him? So, and what's he doing? He's saying, here's a Jew who's standing proudly on his religion. He's not apologizing for it, and he respected that.
The Arabs appreciate, not Arabs, I keep saying Arabs, Muslims appreciate when the Jews do what they have to do.
So when I speak, there's a village not far from where I live. And when you speak to them there, they have tremendous respect for the religious Jews. They're not as respectful for the Tel Aviv crowd. And no offense if you're from the Tel Aviv crowd, but they respect it. As a religious person, a God-fearing person who believes the Jews did receive the Torah, even if they may think it's been corrupted or was supposed to follow the Quran. If we're following that, they respect that. Far more so than if we
that's secularism, yeah. Well, that's the great Satan. What's a concrete ask of a Muslim leader that you would put out there who privately, let's say, supports coexistence, but stays quiet? Grow spine.
Literally grow a spine. What's holding back coexistence is people having the confidence to speak out. I'll give you 2 examples.
Like the Imam of Peace.
Yeah, so I speak to every night probably 5 to 10 Palestinians, Arabs, from over the Green Line who don't see themselves as Israeli. And most of those conversations are beautiful, they're peaceful. They express, one of the most common things they express is, I ask, if Israel just declared sovereignty and gave you the same rights as me, would you be happy? Would you accept it? The overwhelming majority say yes. And then at the end of the video, they asked me not to upload it. I had one of the most beautiful conversations with a Palestinian from America. She saw herself as Palestinian, and it was beautiful. She was just she just glowed peace. And we by chance met on the video app I talk on a couple of days ago. And she didn't say anything. She just said, that video has caused me so much. I've been thrown out of school. My family's up. And I said, look, I didn't mean to cause you any problem. I'm going to pull down the video now. It's such a shame that my audience loved you. She said, I know, I read the comments. It made me feel so good inside.
But you can't give it up.
But you can't. There was another example where I stood, and this is one of the craziest things. I stood with a Palestinian activist 10 years ago, before October the 7th, and she said, will you hold the Palestinian flag for peace? I said, no. But if you hold an Israeli flag, I'll hold your Palestinian. We can hold both together.
Okay.
And so we held it. My audience was like, oh, how beautiful. She wants peace.
Her audience, shame on you.
Her audience, she lost her job. They sent her death threats. And so if you're an Arab leader, grow a spine, speak for coexistence so that the millions of Muslims that do want to coexist have the ability to say so publicly.
And now that they're already in the West, I mean, the West is a place for coexistence. America's a melting pot, and Americans want the diversity. They love the diversity, but not when the diversity says that we're going to destroy everything else that's not like us.
Yeah, and the diversity that's coming is going to maybe shake some of those beliefs to their very foundations.
Mm-hmm. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
It's going to get much worse.
And last, personal. Regular morning, Jerusalem. What do you feel? What are you busy with? What's Joseph Cohen doing?
In the morning, usually catching up on sleep. I go to bed at like
Oh, you're up the whole night? Okay, so there you go. You're a night person. You're doing the work. You're putting in the leg work because, like you said, it takes hours. And it really is one at a time. And you don't know which person you're going to touch, which individual's mind you're going to change. Yeah. And also, these are young people now. One day they're going to be the future leaders of their communities. And they'll remember a conversation they had with a nice Jew who took the time. And that can make all the difference between their messaging. Amazing. Joseph, thank you for being here. You can find Israel Advocacy on YouTube. We're going to put all the links in the show notes. Joseph, thank you. You made Aliyah, like you said, in 2024 into Jerusalem, the city that the Quran calls Al-Quds. Is that what you call it?
No, but we call it Yerushalayim. No, yeah. We call it Yerushalayim.
Right. Your kids play in the parks there. You said your daughter broke her arm in the first week that you moved here, and a Muslim doctor treated her, and that was a special experience. Yeah. You're still talking to Karim. That's what you do every day online in the streets, in the city that you came home to. Thank you so much. This is the Weekly Squeeze on Moral Edge. I'm Chanale. We will see you next week.